You want to know the story of my first deal? It's long and complicated. Here we go. The story of my first deal is actually the story of my first deals, and one of the things that I learned from reading The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump is it never pays to work on one deal at a time. They all have to overlap each other. Because if you're only working on one real estate deal at a time and one doesn't close, your life really sucks. But if you're working on 10 real estate deals at the same time and 3 close, that's usually more than working full time. If 5 of them close, that's more than $100,000 a year, no problem. Trust me, I know. I closed 5 my first year and I broke 200. And if 10 of them close, you got a tax problem. And that's a good problem to have because I got the solution. What we're going to cover in this video is how I got started in real estate, how I got my first deals, what went wrong, and how I fixed it and got them closed. And before we get into that, I'm going to give you a little backstory on why I chose real estate as a profession and why I chose to do it the way that I do, with little money and no credit. Growing up, I was a really smart kid. Matter of fact, I was so smart that in first grade, I actually skipped ahead a grade to second. The very next year, I got left back. We found out shortly after that I was dyslexic and I wasn't actually reading the material and digesting it, just committing everything the teacher said to memory. The downside of being dyslexic is I don't read, write, or spell so good. A matter of fact, at 44 years old at the time of this recording, 2 times out of 10, I still misspell my name. The upside of dyslexia is you're usually super smart. And yeah, I know my IQ is really high. Imagine if I could read the test. I've got some statistics on this slide of different races and prison populations, and just know that if you're dyslexic, we more than double the top performers of any racial or ethnic group that gets locked up, because if you're super smart but you can't read, write, or spell too good, well, you may not be able to get a normal job, but the underworld will take you. So at 16 years old, I decided to embrace my entrepreneurial spirit, and I had one of my friends help me take notes in a DARE class on how to spot a fake ID. Unbeknownst to the officer teaching the class, he actually just educated me on how to replicate any state's driver's license flawlessly, solving one of every underage high school student's major problems: how to procure a fake ID and how to buy alcohol. I had gotten really good at my craft, charging anywhere from $20 to $100 per ID, and I was cranking out at least 5 to 10 a day for years. I mean, it's not like I ever did any homework anyway, and all I had to do was show up to class and listen, and I'd get really good grades. I could literally make the fake IDs at my desk in class while I was paying attention to what the teacher was saying. As you can imagine, business was booming, and this instantly made me one of the most popular kids in school. Matter of fact, I had other friends that would actually go out to other high schools at lunchtime, collect other kids' IDs and payments. I'd give them a VIG, and I'd recreate IDs for other students in other schools in the surrounding towns as well. But it's been said, every bad thing carries the seeds of its own destruction with it, and eventually, after enough kids got caught with my IDs, I got turned over to the police. At 18 years old, I was facing criminal charges for running a fake ID ring. That was their word, not mine, but I had no idea that I'd created thousands of IDs by that point in time. Whoops, I guess I'm kind of industrious. To complicate matters, I was turned in shortly after my 18th birthday. So now I could be tried as an adult. With a year-long investigation and criminal trial pending shortly after my 19th birthday, I was sentenced to 1,000 hours of community service, which I managed to do at a Jewish community center where they held a camp for multiply handicapped and autistic-like children. I don't think I was supposed to, but I fucking loved it, and my heart went out to these kids. Honestly, as having a learning disability myself, I found them really relatable. So I stayed on at the camp long after my 1,000 hours was done for 4 more years before I wound up running it and making payroll because, honestly, unless I try not to, I just kind of take over everything. Before I knew it, I had been picked up by the Make-A-Wish Foundation and several families privately so I could pick up their kids out of wheelchairs and put them on rides in Disney World and other fun destinations. I'd been working out a lot, and it just seemed like everybody needed hired muscle with heart. I was their guy. Then one day, one of the kids' parents I'd previously been to Disney World with a few times called me up in college and said, "Hey, Chuck, listen, I got a question. Can you drive a truck? I drove a 1994 Ford Bronco at the time, and I thought to myself, sure, no problem, I got you. He said, okay, you're going to come work with me in Midtown Manhattan in the Garment Center. I'll teach you a few things about business. Little did I know he needed me to drive the largest box truck you could possibly drive without a CDL in Midtown Manhattan. Several minor fender benders later, I'd figure it out. Furthermore, I learned really quick the reason why none of his other staff could drive this truck for him is they were all out on prison work release and had done 10 to 20 years. You can imagine what that did for my vocabulary. Initially, I wasn't even really sure what my newfound boss and mentor did for a living. I knew he was a textile jobber, but I had no idea what jobbing was. I later found out that was the art of buying and selling. In this case, he was jobbing fabric. He'd take me into warehouses like the one you see on the screen, or like a Victoria's Secret cutting room at the end of the season, and there was a whole bunch of other people there doing the exact same thing that he was, trying to buy everything incredibly cheap so they could resell it for a profit. The owners of these warehouses didn't really care about what he did, and they just wanted all the garbage taken out quickly, but you had to compete with a lot of people that were off the boat Israelis and Italians and Middle Easterns, where handling or negotiating over price was almost culturally accepted, and if you weren't haggling over how much you were going to buy something at, you were going to offend the competition and the person you were acquiring the goods from. I watched him do this over and over again over a week-long period. I knew that if he could buy everything at 50 cents a yard, he could resell it easily for $1 and double his money. I also looked at how antsy the owners of these warehouses were, and it just seemed like they wanted it over quickly and they were wasting his time. So finally I told my boss, even though math is not my strong point, I could do your job better than you. All I need is $100,000 in a book bag, cash. As you could imagine, at 19 years old, this took a little bit of convincing. But finally, he said, look, I trust you, and I trust you with my son. I know where you live, and I know you're going to come back. Here's the bag. Good luck. I left the office on 37th between 8th and 9th in Midtown Manhattan and walked a couple blocks to the warehouse where I knew they were looking to liquidate. Found the location of the company where I needed to be. Walked out of the elevator, saw all my competition there with calculators and pens and pencils, adding stuff up and negotiating, going, well, I'll give you $1 a yard for this, and 5 cents a yard for that, and $3 a yard for this, and it just looked like the owner of the place was getting really aggravated, so I walked right past the competition into his office. Again, I was 19 and nervous as shit, staring at a Hasidic Jew in a leather chair smoking a cigarette. I took the bag off, slammed it on his desk, opened it up, and said, look, motherfucker, I'm going to give you 25 cents a yard for everything, and I'm taking it out today. His jaw dropped and he stared at me. I waved my hand up and down in front of his face a few times. I thought the poor guy had a stroke or I'd really offended him. Honestly, I thought I failed. So I zipped up the bag, threw it back over my shoulder, and started walking for the elevator. Just as I hit the button, I heard footsteps behind me and a man with a Jewish accent going, wait, come back. This man has made a deal. He has chutzpah. Come back, please. And he put his hand on my shoulder. And he said, turn around. At this point, I knew I got him, so I turned around really slowly and said, I'm sorry, I don't turn around. 20 cents. He shook my hand and said, you've got the deal. Everybody out. Everybody on the elevator. As the competition piled on the elevator and prepared to leave, I remembered waving goodbye, looking him in the eye and saying, Shalom, motherfuckers. That Friday, my boss took my parents out to dinner with me and offered me $70,000 a year, health benefits, a parking spot in Midtown Manhattan, and let me use his Lexus for a week. I didn't even know what a Lexus was. I figured out later it's like a fancy Toyota for people with little dicks who are trying to show off. mulled over the offer with my parents, and then I ultimately decided, well, they helped me decide that I should probably go back and finish college. And I do have a degree now in rehabilitative services with a concentration in biology. It's most likely still in my sock drawer at my mom's house, and nobody could take it away from me, but I've never fucking used it. We parted friends, and I worked with my future boss every time I had downtime, honing my craft as a buyer, with the understanding that when I did graduate college, I would be coming back to work with him as the vice president of his company. Which I did do for 4.5 years, but the flip side of the equation is I was absolutely fucking miserable doing it. I had to wake up every morning at 6:20 a.m. just to drive an hour and a half one way into the city to work all day, to turn around and drive an hour and a half back. That's 3 hours a day in traffic 5 days a week. Math has never been my strong point, but I did do that equation, and what that equates to is 32.5 days a year spent commuting. That's over a fucking month. I started to think about what I could do at that time, and I also started to think about that $70,000 a year salary after taxes and healthcare was maybe 37 take home at best. It was fucking bullshit considering he was taking home every week what I was taking home every month. Fortunately, I'd been pursuing one of my passions in my spare time. I always wanted to be a bodybuilder. Matter of fact, in college, I'd managed to put on 135 pounds in 4.5 years. I'd used my time and structured work schedule in the garment center to refine it until I actually stepped on stage and started winning trophies. When I finally stepped down after a car accident at 24 years old as New Jersey's largest drug-free competitive bodybuilder. That and $3 wouldn't get me a cup of Starbucks. But it did help me develop discipline and an incredible work ethic. I'll never forget the first time I stepped on stage, and there weren't many guys on stage with me, maybe 30 at most, and I looked out onto a crowd of 500, maybe even 1,000 people, thinking to myself, holy shit, I might be capable of something here that the general public can't do. Like, I stuck to this. I wonder what else I could do. And then it was time to start educating myself. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be rich. I didn't want to have a boss. I wanted freedom. And I knew in order to do that, I was going to have to go into business for myself or learn how to invest. So I started testing the waters and ripping through audio books during 90-minute to 2-hour cardio sessions while I refined the monster that I had become. There's only so many hours in a day, and you gotta make the most of your time. Then one day on the treadmill, I saw this chubby little Asian dude talking about wealth quadrants and passive income, and he had this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Well, I had to know what that was about, so I got a copy of the audio, and I went through it, and I didn't even believe this passive income stuff was real, but I knew I had to start investing. And at the end of that book, there was a list of recommended readings, so I went through literally every book on it, starting with Think and Grow Rich, that really gave me the secrets to success and worked me into a white heat over achieving my goals and what it was I wanted in life, financial freedom. Then the time had come to take action, massive action. So I started investing the simplest way possible from behind my desk in Midtown Manhattan. I started investing in the stock market via dial-up modem. And I found out pretty quick what I already knew, that investing in the stock market is pretty much educated gambling at best. And if you have enough information to make an intelligent decision, it's actually illegal and it's insider trading. But I was kicking ass investing in penny stocks. Or so I thought. Initially, I lost a lot of money, then I made it all back. Then one day when I was out working in the warehouse, I forgot to put in a stop loss, and the penny stock I had invested in completely went under, and I lost $80,000 in a split second. My entire life savings was gone, wiped out in a flash. Looking back in retrospect, this was one of the best days of my life. It actually showed me that I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, and I had just gotten lucky. I wasn't looking to make a living on luck. I was looking to learn a process that could be replicated time and time again, flawlessly. Furthermore, this proved to me that by working and saving, I would have to work and save for 4 more years just to make back and keep the $80,000 I'd lost. Clearly, the stock market was not for me, and this was just part of my education. Maybe it was a little bit more expensive than college, but man, did I learn. I wasn't sure what the hell I wanted to do. I really liked the idea of real estate, but all the number crunching and mathematical equations that Robert Kiyosaki brought to the table really didn't help me out given my learning disability. Then one day I heard a commercial on the radio for the Learning Annex's Real Estate Wealth Expo. And man, if Donald Trump, a local billionaire, was there and he supported it, I knew I had to be there too. Furthermore, I'd already read his book, The Art of the Deal. Well, I went to the audiobook. Great book, by the way. Highly recommended. And at this 2-day event, in a record crowd of 14,000 people at the Jacob Javits Center, I sat through 2 days of sales pitches of people going, and if you've got $3,000, you can come to my 3-day event, and I'll teach you everything you ever need to know about real estate. Well, eventually I broke, and I found somebody who I thought resonated with my DNA and my soul. And I did feel educated and inspired, and I'd learned a tremendous amount. Funny thing is, just a few years later, I'd actually get a contract to speak on stage with Donald Trump that I would say no to, and an audition to The Apprentice that I also turned down. Here's a clip of that contract for you to laugh at, and a picture with me and Bill Zanker, the owner of the Learning Annex. The MC of this event was a gentleman by the name of Robert Sheeman, friends until this day, and I would consider him a personal mentor. He got on stage and proceeded to talk about how he was dyslexic and he could do this business anyway. I literally said to myself, if this idiot could do it, why the fuck can't I? I grabbed him when he stepped off stage and I said, Robert, I'm a dyslexic too. I'd like to get to know you better. He handed me a copy of his latest book that's on this slide and he autographed it and wished me luck. The very next year I came back with my tax returns showing that I had made in excess of $200,000 and I grabbed him and I said, Robert, thank you. Look what I did. He gave me his cell phone, and we've been connected ever since, and man, we've made a lot of money together. Matter of fact, here's a picture of us together in Long Island, Florida. Met this guy in many places around the country and around the world. Awesome dude. If you get the chance to see him, highly recommended. I got the vibe from one of his presentations that I was going to have to deal with people who needed to sell, not people who wanted to sell. And Robert posed the question to 14,000 people, what is it that people in desperate situations look for? Somebody else screamed out salvation. I wrote down the name Salvation Home Buyers, went home that night, jumped on LegalZoom, couldn't believe the name hadn't been taken, and I structured my first LLC. Now, I didn't have the logo or the website or any of that other stuff. I just had the name. Everything else came later after I started making some money. But if you think you need to have an LLC, I'd be the first advocate of saying you should sit down and start one right now. There's no time like the present. The next morning when I went back to the second day of this 2-day event, I was different. I was a business owner, and I even bought a course on how to buy and sell distressed real estate with little money and no credit from a man named Ron LeGrand. I knew that motivation came from desperation, and I knew that I was going to have to take a leap of faith because I perform incredibly well under pressure. So I wrote out a business plan. Now, I know it's not the greatest business plan, but looking at it right here, and it's framed in my office today, that is almost a $10 million business plan at this point in time. I wrote out my letter of resignation, and the following Friday, I walked into work, gave my boss my 2 weeks notice, and I quit my job. But he fired me instead. Now I'm a broke, jobless business owner. But hey, no pressure, no diamonds, and if life is comfortable, you'd never do anything anyway, right? So I decided to keep piling all the pressure on. The next morning, when I woke up, I told my parents I was going to cover all the household expenses, the PSE&G bill, the cable, the phones, Easy Pass, their cell phones, shit, I even got them landscaping. With absolutely no way to pay the new bills I just acquired. But hey, if you tell somebody you're going to do it, in my world, you're going to do it, because nobody wants to be a liar. And it's not a lie if you're predicting the future. So don't be afraid to talk a load of shit and back it up. No pressure, no diamonds. Shortly after that, I walked into my high school and met with my high school resource room teacher, Miss Krastik, and made good on a promise I made to her when I graduated 4.5 years ago that I would come back one day and finance a scholarship for learning disabled kids just like myself. Now I've taken on a load of my parents' bills, and I've picked 5 kids that I'm going to give $1,000 to each when they graduate just a few short months ago with absolutely no money, and I have no idea how I'm going to get what it is that I need. But I'm a man of my word, and I will make good on those promises. So I did exactly what the Ron LeGrand real estate course I bought told me to do, and I started marketing my heart out with every dollar I had left, and I even put some expenses on my mother's credit card, with her permission, of course. Originally, I'd started with door knocking. I'd acquired a list penance list, and I went from door to door saying, "Hello, I'd like to buy your house. My name is Chuck," right after I'd knocked on it. Only problem with that is, at 6'1", 265 pounds, you kind of look a little bit more like, "Hey, you owe me money, time to pay." You know what? Forget about it. If you're not from Jersey, you may not understand. So I found a compensatory strategy. I started leaving notes on people's doors instead, and I actually found I got a lot more calls back if I didn't use my name. "Hey, sorry, I missed you, Brittany." Now, not only was I getting calls from distressed homeowners, but I could put notes like this on any door, and I was almost always guaranteed to get a call from a curious guy or a really jealous wife or girlfriend. All I had to do was defuse the situation and find myself in a conversation. In addition, before I quit my job, I spent my last dollars on a newspaper ad that said "Salvation Homebuyers. We buy houses, take over payments," and it went to an 800 number that I still use to this day. It works really, really well. It works even better in bad weather, like blizzards and rain, where there's blackouts and nobody has anything to do except read the newspaper. By the end of my first day of business, just from following up on leads that I generated, I actually went on my first appointment and went to contract and got the deed on my first house. It was actually a condo on Marshall Street in Patterson with the help of a woman named Luz. I'll make up her last name, Brisket. I had met her at a local real estate club, and she had convinced me she knew what she was doing. Plus, she was an older single mom, and she lived in Ridgewood, New Jersey, so how could I not trust her? Man, that was a fucking mistake, but we'll get to that later. A few short days after that, I was actually given the opportunity to go acquire a house in Teaneck, New Jersey from a couple lawyers I met at the same real estate investment club that told me this particular property was an unworkable short sale. So replicating the same process, I walked in, got a contract, got the deed signed, helped everybody move out, and now I had 2 properties under contract, and I owned them because I had the deeds, so in fact you do, in less than 20 days. Business was good, but I still hadn't made any money. Truth be told, I honestly don't even really think I slept. So let's talk about what went wrong, and there was plenty of stuff that could go wrong because honestly, way back in 2004, I didn't even have anybody to learn from in the tri-state area. Could not find a soul in a local real estate club that had done a wholesale or even a subject to deal to begin with. And in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I'm not afraid to admit, early on in business, I struggled with a little bit of confidence. So I decided to learn from an older woman who had told me she knew exactly what she was doing because she had taken a bunch of Ron LeGrand courses before, which is one of the courses I bought in the first place. All I did was market, talk to people, get us in the door, and sell the houses. She furnished me with all the paperwork and the penmanship because, let's face it, mine sucks. Matter of fact, to this day, every time I buy a house or do a tabletop closing, I often have the seller do the paperwork simply because it's legible. The other situation that presented a challenge is initially I learned this strategy from a Ron LeGrand course. Now, I got nothing against Ron. I actually think he's got some pretty amazing strategies, and he's one of the greatest platform salesmen I've met in my entire life. It's just that real estate is a really state-specific business, and everything that he taught me was applicable in Florida, more specifically Jacksonville. Funny story about me and Ron, just 5 short years later, when I'd made millionaire before I turned 30, he actually paid to come listen to me speak in Los Angeles at SANG, Speakers and Authors National Gathering. And we're still friends to this day. So let's go into these problems and just how I fixed them. And yeah, it goes a little bit deeper than learning from the wrong person. And this is not meant to scare you. This is just to show you the problems that you'll encounter. On the second property that I picked up, which was actually chronologically the first to close. By the way, remember, working multiple deals at once will always make you more money. This is something I learned from Donald Trump in The Art of the Deal. Anyway, I was told by the group of lawyers who gave it to me that it was an impossible short sale, that the bank would not take a discount, so I tried something absolutely revolutionary. I put a sign in the front yard. Turned out that nobody had pulled comps appropriately, and I actually had a bidding war over this house day one. Nobody had cared to market it. Piece of cake, slam dunk. I had people fighting to pay me more than what was owed on this particular house, which wasn't too bad because I was only into the deal for $10. However, I had to get all the documentation re-executed before the closing because everything I had wasn't legal in the state of New Jersey where I lived. And I've made this part of my mission in life, to standardize paperwork so that nobody accidentally commits fraud, because in this game, the stakes are incredibly high. Think about it like this. If you've ever played Monopoly, a game by the Parker brothers of Real Estate Holdings, does anything strike you as incredibly odd on that board? How about this? Boardwalk, Park Place, go to jail. And you didn't even know what you did wrong. So this is definitely not a fake it till you make it business. After we'd corrected all the paperwork at the closing table, this one took me 20 days to get closed. I was into it for $10. The purchase price was $350. The sale price was $389. There was a gross profit of $39,000. I gave the buyers a seller's concession. I paid their closing costs, even gave them a rate buy down. And in 20 days, I walked away with a check for a little over $20,000. Now, ever since that day, the entire world has looked different to me. Shit, I would have had to work half a year to sock away that kind of coin. I remember the morning of the closing. I woke up, my teeth hurt from grinding them for the last 20 days. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I threw up because I was stressed. I'd never seen anybody do this. I wasn't sure it was going to close. I brushed my teeth. I drove to the law office where the closing was, opened my car door. I threw up again. I walked into the law office. They directed me into the boardroom where there was a buyer, a seller, a title company. I asked him where the restroom was. I walked in there and I threw up again, and just a few short minutes later, I walked out with a check for $20,000 and change. I went home later that day and I celebrated by sleeping for 14 hours straight. The next morning, I woke up and I thought to myself, I don't know if I want to do this again. That was really hard. I opened my wallet. I saw the check for 20 G's. I went to the bank and I deposited it. Then I started thinking to myself, you know what? Yeah, I think I'm going to do this again. So let's look at my next deal. Are you noticing a common theme here? My binder deposit was $10,000. The purchase price on this one was the outstanding debt, which would have been a mortgage of $60,000 plus roughly $14,000 in back payments and taxes plus interest. I actually recorded the deed on this house, which makes it a subject to deal. I had to pay about $600 in transfer tax because I had not yet learned how to use land trusts and circumvent that. I sold this particular property for $110,000, and I gave the buyer a $3,310 seller's concession. At the closing table, the buyer's lawyer completely freaked out at me because my deed was in the improper format, and technically, I did not have legal marketable title on this particular property. Thank you, Luz Brisket. Furthermore, the buyer's lawyer made me aware of the fact that what I had done, or what somebody had done in my name and the name of my company, using the wrong paperwork and filling it out for me, was actually bank fraud and a jailable offense. And you wonder why making standardized paperwork has become my mission in life, because I don't want anybody to have to go through this shit. The lawyers met behind closed doors without me and the buyer, and when they came back out, the buyer's lawyer said, "Listen, son, I don't believe you intended or had any malintent here. Matter of fact, I think what you're doing is very good. You're paying off this distressed seller's delinquent loan and all their back taxes, and you're helping my client, a single father, buy a condo with his son and live there under market, plus you're paying their closing costs. Here's the correct paperwork. Please learn from this. Use it every time. Go get this signed by the seller, come back, and we'll close tomorrow." And we did. Not too bad, right? I mean, honestly, it would have taken me more than a year to sock away this kind of money. Who the fuck am I kidding? We're probably looking at more like 2 years. But now I feel like a success. I can make good on the promises that I made to my parents and pay all their bills, and I can fund the scholarship for not just this year, but several years in the future. What did I say? No pressure, no diamonds. Talk shit and back it up. It's one of the greatest formulas to success that you'll never believe till you do it. Just a few short days after the closing, I started getting frantic calls from Luz Brisket going, "That's my property. Where's my half of the money?" And I tried to cordially explain to her how she had used the wrong paperwork. She'd never done a transaction before. She committed fraud in my name, and I could actually be in jail for her teaching. But she wanted her money, and no good deed goes unpunished. So she sued me. A lawsuit is nothing more than the adult version of a fight on the playground, but your first one could be a little scary. Fortunately for me, this one got pushed to mediation. I'm sitting in a mediation room with her, her lawyer, and me and my lawyer. And my lawyer whispers in my ear, "Chuck, look at her. She's ugly." And I'm like, "What do you mean, Peter?" He goes, "No, really, look at her. She's ugly. Look at that fucking nose." I'm like, "Okay, Peter, what's your fucking point?" He goes, "Look at her teeth. Is that a 50-cent gap or a 75-cent gap? I bet you I could slide 3/4 right in between those two front teeth." I'm like, "Peter, what the fuck are you getting at?" He says, "She's not suing you because she thinks she's entitled to half. She's suing you because you just made a lot of money really quickly. She's broke. Any woman that looks like that would spend money on fixing her appearance, but she's ugly as sin. We got this." We offered her $1,000 to walk the fuck away. She settled for $2, and we all lived happily ever after. I hope she sees this video. So anyway, there you have it. The extended story of how I got into real estate, how I got my first deals, what went wrong, and how I fixed them. Guys, I really hope this helps you understand why it's important to listen to the right people and make sure you have the right material when you get into this business, because honestly, the stakes are a lot higher than anybody tells you, even when you're doing it with little money and no credit. If you'd like to hear more, if you'd like to book a consultation, or if there's something you'd like to hear in the future, don't hesitate to contact us. Talk to you soon. Bye for now. FLCS. Looking to make money in real estate, but you're stuck? Maybe you.